There we go. Edit a little for this gathering. Sorry, go on.
Thank you
Okay.
for coming over to present, and I'm sure it'll be great. See here, Carl, I guess I'll let you take over. Let you go.
All right. Hopefully the sound is okay. My name is Carl Sack. I am the GIS Program Coordinator and faculty in GIS at Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College. And I am going to be talking today about a project that I'm involved with to map habitats in the Lake Superior National Estuarine Research Reserve, which is in Superior, Wisconsin. That to work. A presentation in 4 parts, give a little background on the reserve, talk about work that I did last summer, and then work that's ongoing now and goals for this coming summer, starting in a week or 2. Wait, is this being recorded? Is this recording? Okay, great. Okay. So the Lake Superior Reserve, or as it's commonly called to avoid too much mouth spaghetti, is a unit of the National Estuarine Research Reserve System, or NERS, administered by NOAA. And really it's made up of lands that were already sort of public lands, either administered by the city of Superior or the Wisconsin DNR. And it sort of developed as a partnership between UW Superior, UW Extension, and NOAA, and I think it's sort of evolved from there into more, well, I don't know all the ins and outs of the administration. I don't work for the reserve, it's just about a bit of background. So it's 16,697 acres in total of land, constituting a lot of freshwater coastal habitats, a fair bit of upland forests as well. But it in a good variety of marshes, swamps, forest types, barrier bar set of ecosystems with some old growth pine forest. And it's really an area that's facing rapid ecological change. Positive and negative. We have things like the emerald ash borer now in the area, swiftly killing off the black ash in the swamps, which is pretty tragic. But also efforts to reseed areas of the estuary with wild rice that are being spearheaded by the Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe in collaboration with other agencies. So really the reserve has this goal of mapping its areas to, well, partly because it is mandated by NOAA. The reserve was established in 2011, and one of the mandates that reserves units have is to create habitat maps and keep them updated every 5 years. And the Lake Superior Reserve has yet to produce its first set of habitat maps. So they're really hoping to, it's becoming sort of critical to document what's there now so that every 5 years you'll be able to see what's changed. They, however, had a lack of staff time to get this work done and kind of a lack of GIS experience and expertise among the staff for the reserve. And it's a very large area to map. It's almost 17,000 acres, possibly quite a bit more because, now we've been talking with others in the region who are really, there's a good body of community of scientists in the area who are interested in all things estuary and having to do with the health of that region's aquatic habitats. So they're interested in, well, can we extend this beyond the land boundaries of the reserve? So quite a large area, and that makes kind of getting out in the field and practical. The example map you see up here is not the Lake Superior Reserve. That is a map, a habitat map that was made by the Grand Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. Can't remember exactly where that on a coast. And the Lake Superior Reserve is actually the only unit in the reserve system currently that is on a freshwater coast. However, there is a second freshwater reserve unit being developed in on the Bay of Green Bay right now. So that will become the second freshwater unit. So it's a little unique in terms of the needs, habitat mapping needs of Lake Superior Reserve versus other coastal reserves. So in 2021, basically I was sitting on the tail end of a NASA grant. We'd gotten a 1-year no-cost extension due to COVID, and I had $40,000 still sitting in my account to use up. And I wanted to do something with it that could benefit students. A lot of and this was a grant that we had a sub-award from San Jose State University, and most of what we used it for was paying for student project assistance and internships with NASA. And so I had this extra money, and I was, like, how do I use this? I had a few conversations with a few different people that led to, can I hire some students to do something interesting? And I reached out to my friend Deanna, who is the director of the Lake Superior Reserve, and said, hey, do you have anything sitting on your, sitting on your plate that I might help with? And just so happened, lo and behold, there was this habitat mapping need that they were just getting started on, trying to figure out what they were going to do about that. And so I said, well, hey, I have, money, I can hire students, we can be labor, we have some GIS expertise, I can advise. So we ended up making it happen. It was a collaboration that came together among a half dozen or so different folks, a couple of reserve staff members, a board of friends of the reserve, board member who had retired from Esri, actually, Mike Kutnick, Brandon Crumwady, who is NOAA's regional GIS person, happens to live in Duluth. And so we kind of brought together a project team, and I ended up hiring 3 interns. Only one of them was actually one of my students. We were at a real low ebb for enrollment, and we still are, just starting to come back actually in the fall. Hopefully our numbers are up, knock on wood. But most students had either graduated and moved on or were spoken for on other projects. I had one student. So I ended up reaching out to a high school teacher at Cloquet, Dr. Cindy Welsh, who is really big on having students do GIS projects, and they've had some nationally recognized award-winning GIS projects. And she had a couple of students who, were interested in summer work. And so I actually hired a couple of high school students, local high school students as well, to help out with the project. So that was kind of a neat collaboration that came out of this as well. And our goal was to create a preliminary habitat map just for the Wisconsin Point subunit. So the Lake Superior Reserve has 4 areas, and the smallest one is, the second smallest one is Wisconsin Point at 2,800 acres. And it's this spit of the largest freshwater barrier bar in the Great Lakes, possibly in the world. And I hear contradictory things about that, but it's the sandbar that's Minnesota Point on the Duluth side, and then on the Superior side, it's Wisconsin Point, and the state boundary goes through the Superior entry, which is the natural mouth of the St. Louis River that you see there in the upper left corner. And so this barrier bar has some really unique ecosystems on it. It has sand dunes with dune grass. It has old growth pine forest. It has deciduous and mixed forest, and it has open prairie meadow habitats. So and as well as freshwater marshes of a few different types. So we wanted to use that as our playground, kind of. And with that goal, we needed to start by really learning the schema that NOAA has for the National Estuary Research Reserve System. They have a very well-developed schema. They don't have a very well-developed and documented process for getting to that schema, to getting to the end result. So we had to learn what was out there in terms of, some example processes, and that turned out to be a little harder than expected. Draft a preliminary workflow for how we were going to make this map, conduct some field work to, learn, compare the schema to what was on the ground and say, this is this class, this is this class, this is how this works. And then also take some ground truth points for accuracy assessment. And then we wanted to gather and process, we needed to gather and process remotely sensed data to use as base layers for the map, and end up creating a set of habitat, a continuous set of habitat polygons. That's the format. So what's unique and interesting about the NER system, the NER classification system, is not unlike, say, the National Land Cover Data Set, which is raster. NER SCS wants vector polygons at like 1/10 of an acre for the minimum mapping unit. So the end result is a polygon layer with an attribute table with a number of different attributes, which I'll show in a few slides.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Do you go out into the water at all, or
We
where's
did.
your stopping point?
Yeah, actually, it's intended to cover the entire land and water area within the reserve, because in the schema, there's actually a number of classes for different bottom types. Now, with spectral data, it's hard to assess the bottom type. So you do as fine resolution as you can get. I have been talking, the work we'll do this summer. I did connect with some folks from Minnesota Sea Grant who have taken sonar surveys of parts of the estuary and characterized bottom vegetation with that, and so that might end up going into the final maps. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty neat to find that they had done that, and yeah, so we'll see how if we can make that fit in, and that'll be part of our work this summer is looking at that data. But the NERS classification schema, this is a big long document on the schema. It's four level classification schema. There's a system level, subsystem, class, and subclass. And so you end up with these 4-digit codes for different habitat types. And they want everything mapped to at least the class level. We tried to get everything to the subclass level that we could. But like I said, for the completely submerged areas, it can be difficult to classify the bottom types. So the document on the right here is actually a crosswalk between NERS and CCAP, which is a coastal raster land cover data set based on the National Land Cover data set that's more detailed for coastal areas, produced for coastal areas. And they're trying to get it, NOAA is trying to get it at a 1 meter resolution right now. And we were only able to access 30 meter. They only have complete data for 30 meter resolution for this area, for the Superior, the St. Louis River estuary area. So it ended up not being that useful, but this crosswalk is very useful because it lists out most of the code numbers and classes, and it's just very neatly well organized kind of cheat sheet for classifying different areas. The only example we ended up being able to access last summer for a process was from the Old Woman Creek Reserve, which is Okay, I'm sorry. I misspoke before. I said that Lake Superior was the only freshwater. That's not the only freshwater estuary. This is the other one. It's the second of two, and soon to be three freshwater coastal estuaries in the system, because Old Woman Creek is actually on Lake Erie. It's the only other Great Lakes NER, and it's under 600 acres, so much, much smaller. And we looked at their example, that because you have to put together the reserves have to put together a README document describing how they did it, and basically Old Woman Creek's document says we ended up just getting a bunch of aerial photos and digital orthophoto quadrangles, and at 1 meter resolution. And this is, you probably can't read this, but it basically says they traced the photos by hand because they didn't know what else to do. So, yeah, and I put a little comment in Word there saying, sounds like they just digitized the DOQ by eyesight, which is what they ended up doing. There was really no automated classification involved in their process. And at the end of the day, that's what we ended up doing last summer too, just because we had 10 weeks with high school and early college students who did not, who were learning from the ground up. I mean, the high school students had never touched ArcGIS Pro before, had no experience with remote sensing stuff. So it was like learning from the ground up, but we were still able to accomplish something. So we took a stab at sketching out a workflow for kind of the steps involved in a brainstormy session on a whiteboard in the classroom, and ended up assigning some tasks to the different interns to look at different data sets of imagery. We had NAPE imagery, we had DSS, which is another high resolution imagery data set, and then we had CCAP data, which we thought we were going to get 1 meter CCAP data, and ended up only with the 30 meter stuff, which was pretty much unusable for these maps. So, we needed to perform some basic image processing in ArcGIS Pro, and then tried running a few experimental classifications, unsupervised and supervised, just to see what might kind of produce a usable result, and put it all in a master map package that was shared through ArcGIS Online. So the advantage of that was we all had access to it. All the interns could work from home because we were still in COVID, so we were all kind of working remotely usually. The disadvantage is, a map package is you have to download it and extract it, and it's an individual thing. It's only resides on a computer. So if you need to update something, you have to push the update back to ArcGIS Online and replace the package that's there. So it's not it's usable as a remote work system, but it's not the best version control system. But it ended up not being the package itself that was all that as important as the layers. So, okay, we did some field work. This is Deanna showing us around the different habitats on Wisconsin Point. We're in the pine forest there. And then I took my drone out and we did my DJI Phantom 4 Pro. We did a little bit of drone work just to take some better imagery from different angles to kind of see what things look like from the air in real time. So we could then have an easier time comparing that to the imagery data sets we were using. So there's one of the drone shots of that's Wisconsin Point, the Superior entry, and then Minnesota Point on the other side, heading toward Duluth in the way background. And you can see the old ore docks on the left. To the left of the land there is Alawaz Bay, which is extremely silty now. Historically, it had big wild rice beds, but 20th century industry, pumped out a lot of stuff into the bay and it's silted up, and there's a whole, there's ongoing restoration attempts there, but it's typically the siltiest part of the estuary. So here's 3 of the data sets that we used. On the left, there's the unusable CCAP data, and then the National Geodetic Survey DSS 4-band imagery from 2019. And 2018, we had the 2018 NAEP was the most recent NAEP data set available through NOAA's Digital Coast portal at that point. I think there's 2019, possibly even 2020 NAEP available now. I'm not sure if 2020 is up yet, but those are the data sets we used. The interns did some experimental classifications. You can see the results here, so of a couple of them. So a little bit helpful in delineating some habitats. You can see the beach on the one on the left there. You can obviously see the open sandy areas very well in the pink. And then on the right, you'll see the road pretty well, but it, ended up being less useful. It was a learning process, I'll say that, in terms of, and I've learned a lot more now actually in the intervening year about using, say, object-based image classification, which we'll look at this summer, and different more recent best practices in terms of imagery classification. Yeah. This was all done in ArcGIS Pro. Yeah, which is, may not have the same strength as some other products with classification, but it was what was available to us, and given the timeline and what I was already asking interns to learn on the fly, it made sense to stick with Pro for this. We just used the imagery tools, GIS Pro. And these were either, I'm not sure if they were maximum likelihood or support vector machines classifications. I'm not sure which algorithm they were using for these. So we did both unsupervised, which was ISO, and then supervised attempts at supervised classification. But we didn't have a lot of, we did take some GPS points and use that for input for training data, but probably not as much training data as. So that was a fun experiment. To create the polygons, we ended up I made a hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Online, and this actually worked out really well because rather than having to update the map package while the interns were digitizing the polygons, those were linked straight to ArcGIS Online through an editable hosted feature layer. And with that feature layer, I just referenced the schema to make the exact set of attributes, fields that are called for in the schema. And when we were talking about domains earlier, the domains for the fields that needed defined set of values, the system, subsystem, class, subclass domains, keep those values clean, so you don't have like 3 different spellings of emergent wetland or something like that. So very, very useful to input domains for those. So this ended up being just, I think any other reserve could use this, could just take this layer and use it as a model for their classifications, for their maps. It's got the schema built into it. And it was, and then wherever they were, whatever the computer they were on, the interns were able to edit, create and edit polygons within that layer. So we ended up at the end of our time, at the end of the summer, with about 75% of the land and water area of Wisconsin Point unit classified with habitat polygons at the subclass resolution. So the interns really worked their butts off to do this the last few weeks of the summer. We developed and tested a preliminary workflow. You learned what needed to be modified, where our strengths and weaknesses were. And the interns, of course, learned some GIS skills that were very useful to them. One of them got into Harvard partly because of this project. So, I feel pretty good about that. We still need some QA/QC in the data. That's some of the work we've been doing this spring. We need more imagery. We need more base data. We just 2 imagery data sets from a few years ago at periods of time that were not under our control, taken in dates that were not under our control, not adequate for this project if we're going to automate it. And we need to bring in other data sets like radar and LiDAR. And we need more advice. Like, I was shocked, honestly, midway, a few weeks into the summer, and I thought we would have some good examples of, like, here's 3 different reserves who have, developed, used the same workflow to create their maps. And that doesn't exist. Well, there's no standardized workflow. I'll put it that way. We did just get access to other reserves readmes like a week ago, and we've been doing this for a year. So that was a little bit frustrating, but now we have access to that. So I have homework to do. We will be learning what other reserves have done and working more with that. So this spring, I have had one student intern, a different student intern, working on quality control for some of the data. Some of the polygons, we had issues with overlapping polygons, issues with incomplete field data values for some fields. And so he's been cleaning that data up, and we hope to be able to use the Wisconsin Point data as high quality kind of training data set possibly, or accuracy assessment data set, probably some training data for future work. We'll see how that, if and how we can make that work. The staff on NER, there's been a bit of a switch in who's leading the project from their side, and the new staff lead brought in the Wisconsin State cartographer, Howard Varigan, to help with advising the project. And he helped us put together a technical advisory team. So now we have a core team, which is the 3 of us, myself, Kirsten, I'm really gonna blank on her last name, Rude, from the reserve, and Howard. And we've recruited a technical advisory team of scientists in remote sensing fields and with local knowledge of the estuary to kind of tell us what they think we should do. We hired 4 new interns, 2 of my students and 2 are from UW-Madison. And so we'll be moving into the summer work. I purchased the fixed wing drone I talked about when I introduced myself, in part so that we could survey parts of the area and on demand, because I am concerned about the availability of satellite imagery. There are other sources like Worldview and Planet Labs that we can look for additional high resolution imagery. But as you all know, we live in a kind of cloudy part of the world. So
You're gonna really like being able to fly whenever it's prudent.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the hope, right? And to be able to collect cloudy day imagery when there aren't shadows, and when, I'm hoping that assists with the classification as well. But the drone is not a cure-all, because 17,000 acres, you can't cover that in a day or a week, even with a fixed wing drone. So
How many bands for your fixed wing drone?
I bought a Mica Sense Red Edge MX, which is 5-band sensor at about 7.5 centimeter per pixel resolution at 400 feet. Well, I haven't played with images from this drone yet because it crashed, but my other drone, my DJI, it's actually very smooth. Our GIS Pro can do photogrammetry, and all you do is you point the ortho imagery workspace tool to the folder that contains your images, and it brings them in, and then you create the tie points. It doesn't do, quality-wise, it doesn't do as good a job as Pix4D. So I actually re-upped my Pix4D license for this summer, Pix4D Mapper. It just does a better job at creating the tie points and doing ortho.
Yeah, I would, if you're doing it on a temporary basis, I would probably use the cloud version if you can.
Of Pix4D? We got a
You just
desktop
dump 'em,
license.
and it's super simple, and then you don't need a processing computer on its own. You can do a lot more with the desktop version.
The educational license for the desktop version is not bad. We paid an initial, what was it? $1,500 or $2,000, something like that. And it's a couple $100 a year. I think we just paid $300 to renew a lapsed maintenance license. I think it's a little less than that if you keep it up.
Yeah.
So,
And
and that was well within our budget.
Yeah, and you could do more scientific stuff with the desktop version versus the cloud version. Yep.
Yeah, I've only played with the desktop version a little in terms of, getting orthophoto mosaics, getting DEM, stuff like that. But I haven't probably fully utilized what it's capable of. But I'm excited to do more with that this summer.
I would,
Mhm.
I would encourage, if you are in collaboration with Noah and Brandon probably specifically, because he's deals, I think, with a lot of remote sensing. We do have access as a government agency to Digital Globe through a
Right.
contract that we already have, and we can get archived imagery for free,
Okay.
and you can get multispectral up to 7 bands, which may be beneficial as well. That's what I found anyway in the past.
Mhm.
So you can go back and try to find archived cloud-free imagery for your areas, which may exist
Sure.
already. You can go and look at it just to see if it even exists to begin with.
Mhm.
You wouldn't necessarily be able to go and get it, but Brandon, for example, could possibly. I mean, I can as a National Park Service employee.
Sure.
The planet imagery, I just recently gained access to as well, and you may be able to apply for access to
I
this as
think
well.
we can as an educational, I'm not sure if it's educational or government, but there is a deal with free access to Planet that I just learned about.
Yeah, and it's remarkable.
Is it good?
They're collecting it daily. Now,
Mhm.
again, clouds, right? But as long as they're just collecting it daily, so you can go back and look and again see daily takes. That's at 3-meter resolution and not as high of spectral resolution. So it only has 4 bands of
Okay.
spectral resolution, whereas Digital Globe or Worldview 3, Worldview 2 has more spectral bands and a little bit higher spatial resolution. But you get the temporal resolution with Planet where it's collecting daily. Now,
Right.
again, with the Digital Globe or the Worldview, we do have access as government employees to task satellites. So
Uh-huh.
we can put in a task and say, we want a cloud-free collection over this area. They call it like a 1 in 7, 1 in 14, which just means one cloud-free composite in 7 days or in 14 days, so 2 weeks,
Okay.
try to get a cloud-free composite. So then you're not relying on simply having it's now Maxar is who
Right.
owns the satellites. You're not just relying on, gee, it was happenstance that they collected the imagery. Now you're telling them we want the imagery.
Certain
Again, we can
things,
do
yeah.
it free as a government agency, but again, maybe through other contacts, or maybe since, with your association, that you can do this yourself as well. Or you could go and buy it, or you can task and, say, hey, we want this imagery. These spend $10,000 or whatever it is to get what you really want through Worldview. So those are just some, we've been dealing with this a fair amount and been trying to keep on top of the free satellite imagery game, which is ever evolving, but.
So the tasking costs some money for agencies, but
Not for government agency.
no,
No.
the tasking's free too. Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at stuff like that is definitely going to be, I appreciate the advice, is that's going to be a big part of our job this summer, is finding the data, finding the sources, and figuring out how it all works and what we can do with that. So that's probably a direction we're going to go. And we'll look at the planet stuff and see what that, looks like. It's just something to throw in the mix, even if it's a little lower resolution, it may help a classifier, Yeah, so looking for satellite data. There we go. Maxar imagery, planet imagery. Radar, we already had, the core team already had a brief meeting with Laura Burgo Chavez, who is the director of the Great Lakes, GLARS, Great Lakes Area Remote Sensing Initiative, something like that. It's out of Michigan. And she suggested Pulsar 2 data, radar data, which might cost some money, but we have to look at what that. Yeah, and well, we tried getting her on our technical advisory team, but she's a little busy, so we may still keep bugging her with some requests for advice. LiDAR, if there's LiDAR data sets out there, I think the whole state has LiDAR that was flown in relatively recently. But it might not be. I mean, the part of the problem is we need currency. We need data that is within a couple years, just because shorelines shift, marshes shift. We want this to be current.
Yeah, I think Jim is on.
2015.
Jim is online here, so he'll.
Oh, okay.
I think Douglas County is doing theirs this year. We're doing
that.
ours
Yeah,
this year.
if Douglas County flies it this year, that'll be a real help. If we can get it in time. So I don't know what time, when they're planning to fly it. And then aerial imagery. See if there's another data set that might be useful, and of course, whatever we can pull with the drone where we have gaps to fill. And then figure out what software we want to use for classification. ArcGIS Pro, again, I don't trust it to do the best job in the industry for classification, for raster classification. eCognition does really good object-based image analysis, but it's expensive. So I may try to come up with money to buy that, but if there's an open source alternative, Laura also was telling us about using R and thought that was a good option. There's some tools in R that might work.
Yeah, I did an image classification workshop with GTAC, Forest Service Geospatial Lab, and asked this question if there was open source classification software. And they had built a tutorial in how to do image classification using R in the random forest algorithm, and they had a tutorial they put online. If that would be helpful.
Oh, that
I'll
would
send
be
it to you.
awesome.
Yeah.
If they have a tutorial online, I should look that up and add it to our resources.
Yeah, I'll
Because
send
that's what Laura was suggesting, was random forests with R.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
And I don't know if you collaborate often with other universities, but I know UW La Crosse, there's one professor there, Dr. Nidhi Mishra. He was at our last NAJS meeting. He works in eCognition. I know they have multiple licenses that aren't all being utilized because it's not widely used. That might be a collaboration as well. He may have some insight. I know I was able to check out a license for eCognition a couple years ago.
Okay.
They might still have some.
Okay.
People.
I'll check that out as well. Good to know. Yeah, we have Laura Polito from, I'm getting her name right, from UW Eau Claire on the technical advisory team. I'll reach out to the other. What did you say his name is?
His name is Dr. Neeti Mishra. I
Okay.
know when I finished school there, 2018, he was the sole professor using e-cognition, but they weren't teaching it yet. I think now they are teaching with it
They're
more.
teaching with it. Okay.
But I know they had some licenses, so maybe there might be like summer availability for the program, or they might not be using all the licenses.
Okay,
But I can connect with you later
okay,
and see.
great. Thank you. Of course, the students we hired are excited about getting out in the field. So we're also gonna need to do some field work this summer. One of the things we got to figure out is what sort of sampling methodology we'll use for field surveys. Of course, stratified random sampling is best, but do we have enough time and resources to get out there? If we sample, yeah, well, that's another sort of great bridge to cross. We have a lot of preliminary things to take care of here, but we will be getting out doing some sampling so we can conduct a comprehensive accuracy assessment. Experiment with classifications, run some classifications, and see how gotta run them to see how they work. So, and then the end goal is really a draft workflow by the end of the summer. What I'm hoping for is a draft workflow using object-based image analysis and ground truth accuracy assessment that we can put in a white paper and say this is how we're going to do things moving forward. I don't think we'll have the final classification done. Honestly, I think it's going to be at least another year we get a final habitat map, but the outcome I'd like to see this summer is that documentation. So I'm happy to answer anything else or take any other feedback or advice you all have to give, and I appreciate you having me here.
That's great. Yeah, if you're looking for any help, just rely on us, and you're in the area, and that's great too.
Great.
I was gonna
Makes it
ask
easier.
that. Could we join them on maybe one of the fixed wing flights to see it?
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, I certainly will. I can keep you all in the loop on once I get trained and know how to fly it without crashing it. I'll start inviting other people. I'm actually teaching a drone class this summer. It's a 2-credit 8-week summer term on Wednesday afternoons. So I'll be flying it then, and then maybe sometime in August I could come over here for a demo, or could come to Superior. I don't know. I can stay in touch with it. Yeah, because I know some of you fly drones.
Yeah, Scott really.
Yeah,
But you were saying you mostly do the hexcopter ones.
the quadcopter, yeah. Yeah, yesterday I was out in the field. We have the M300 with the P1 camera.
That's just that's a bigger quadcopter, right?
Yeah, it's like 50 minutes of flight time. So we tested it out yesterday on one of Jason's projects, and the image quality is pretty amazing. And then I got called in from the sheriff's department yesterday, so we inventoried a site. So just in case, we took ownership of a property yesterday, so there's a lot of stuff on the outside. And we took aerial photos of property that was left, and it's kind of a protection on our part saying,
Sure. This is what was here.
this is what was here, this is what we threw away. Yeah, yep.
Okay.
So nobody comes back at us for, well, I had this chest of golden nuggets and you threw it away, you know. So.
Right on.
that
Yeah,
helps
one of
protect
the
us.
things, actually, one of the things I hear from students is, why should I learn how to fly a drone? Why should I get a drone license certification? How is this useful? So I think having some guest speakers in my class, I might
Mhm.
tap you for a guest speaker if you're willing to zoom
Yeah,
in at one
Yeah, I
point.
have something canned, right, ready to go.
Great.
I give presentations at UMD probably once a year. Just once
Okay.
or twice a year, so we can do the same thing. They're pretty interested.
Yeah, I'd love to have you, I'd even love to have you come over and bring your drone, but I understand if that's a bit much of a trek, but at least do something on Zoom.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that, yes.
Anything else? Or probably way over time, so.
No,
I have.
In what sense? Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a close study of the lake level. I haven't been out there. I mean, I haven't been to Superior a whole lot since the ice melted. Of course, I live in Duluth, so I get down to the